You're listening to the Everything Jewish 10 Minutes at a Time podcast, where you'll learn about every Jewish topic imaginable in about 10 minutes. Before we dive in, let me get the embarrassing part out of the way. My voice isn't a real voice. It's an AI-generated voice, so sometimes my Hebrew pronunciation comes out sounding like your uncle after 2 glasses of Manischewitz trying karaoke. If you hear me say Amos instead of Amos, just roll with it. Today's topic is the Book of Amos. Now, Amos isn't exactly the household name of prophets. He doesn't have the fame of Isaiah or the cinematic visions of Ezekiel. But trust me, Amos is like that underrated indie band everyone pretends they knew about before they got cool. His message is short, sharp, and still packs a punch, even thousands of years later. He's the prophet who stands up in the middle of the party, turns off the music, and says, "You people need to get your act together, like right now." Amos lived in the 8th century BCE, around the same time as Hosea, Isaiah, and Micah, but he wasn't part of the priestly class. He wasn't even from the northern kingdom where he delivered his message. Amos was from Tekoa, a small town in Judah, and his day job was as a shepherd and a dresser of sycamore fig trees. Translation: he was a working-class guy, not a polished religious insider. Imagine a farmer from Nebraska suddenly showing up on Wall Street, yelling about corruption and greed. That's basically Amos in ancient Israel. His audience was the wealthy elites of the northern kingdom who thought everything was going great. They had money, they had power, and they thought they had God's blessing stamped like Amazon Prime next-day shipping. Amos crashes that confidence with a reality check, saying God is not impressed with their wealth if it comes from trampling the poor, exploiting workers, and turning religion into a hollow performance. The setup of the book is brilliant, kind of like a stand-up comedian warming up the crowd. Amos starts by announcing God's judgment on all of Israel's neighbors: Damascus, Gaza, Tyre, Edom, Ammon, Moab. His audience must have been nodding along like, "Yes, finally, tell us how awful they are." It's like when your favorite true crime podcast talks about villains from another town. You feel safe, entertained, maybe even a little smug. But then Amos flips the script. After ripping into all the foreign nations, he suddenly turns the spotlight on Judah and Israel themselves. And here's the twist. The crimes of Israel aren't about battlefield brutality or foreign policy. They're about everyday injustice. Selling the poor for a pair of sandals, crushing the needy, taking bribes in court, pretending to worship while living corrupt lives. Basically, Amos is saying, don't cheer too loud, because you're actually worse than the enemies you love to hate. That rhetorical sneak attack hits like a Netflix plot twist you never saw coming. One of Amos's biggest themes is social justice, which makes his book feel incredibly modern. He's basically the original prophet of justice. If Twitter had existed back then, Amos would have been trending under hashtags like #justice for the poor or end corruption now. He blasts the wealthy who lounge on ivory couches, drink wine by the bowlful, and strum away on their harps while ignoring people suffering outside their gates. You can almost picture him walking down a street today, pointing out billionaires flying to space while people can't afford rent. And here's the kicker. Amos doesn't separate religion from ethics. He says God doesn't want your sacrifices, your fancy worship songs, or your big festivals if you're not treating people fairly. The famous line from Amos, which Martin Luther King Jr. later quoted, is "Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like a mighty stream." That's not just poetry. It's a call to action. Amos is saying true spirituality shows up in how you treat others, not how loud you sing. Amos also makes it clear that privilege doesn't equal protection. The people of Israel thought, hey, we're God's chosen nation, so we're untouchable, right? Amos responds with a hard, nope. He reminds them that being chosen means more responsibility, not less. Think of it like being the oldest sibling in a family. You get extra privileges, but you also get stuck babysitting and explaining to your parents why the lamp is broken. Israel's special covenant with God doesn't give them immunity. It means higher expectations. Amos warns that if they keep abusing power, ignoring justice, and coasting on empty rituals, then judgment is coming, and it won't be pretty. He describes disasters, invasions, and ultimately exile. His message is blunt. You can't bribe God with offerings while exploiting people 6 days a week. Amos is basically the anti-prosperity gospel preacher. He's saying faith isn't about cashing in blessings like reward points. It's about living ethically and caring for the vulnerable every single day. One of the coolest things about Amos is how visual his prophecies are. He doesn't just lecture. He paints word pictures that stick in your head like memes. He talks about God roaring like a lion from Zion, making everyone tremble. He has a vision of locusts swarming crops, fire devouring the land, and a plumb line used to measure if Israel is standing straight or crooked. If you've never used a plumb line, think of it like the ancient version of a level app on your phone. It shows whether something is upright or way off. Amos is saying Israel is way off. There's also the vision of a basket of summer fruit, which sounds nice until you realize it's a pun in Hebrew. The word for summer fruit sounds like the word for end. So Amos basically holds up a basket of peaches and says, "Get it? Your time is up." It's prophetic slam poetry with bite. Of course, not everyone was thrilled with Amos's message. The religious establishment tried to shut him up. In chapter 7, Amaziah, the priest of Bethel, tells Amos to go back home and stop prophesying in the northern kingdom. Amos's response? Basically, "Look, I didn't apply for this job. I was herding sheep and pruning fig trees when God grabbed me and said, 'Go prophesy.' So here I am." It's the ultimate reluctant prophet vibe, like someone dragged onto a reality show they never auditioned for. But Amos doesn't back down. He tells Amaziah and the other elites that their cushy lifestyle is about to collapse. His stubborn courage makes him one of the most authentic voices among the prophets. He's not there for fame or fortune. He's there because he can't ignore what he's been told to say. His grit is what makes his short book so powerful. It's 10 chapters, but every line feels urgent and unfiltered. Now, let's be honest. Amos isn't all doom and gloom. There's a small but important section at the very end that offers hope. After 9 chapters of judgment, Amos ends with a vision of restoration. God promises that after the chaos, there will be rebuilding, vineyards will flourish, and the people will be planted securely in their land again. It's like the final act of a superhero movie, where after all the destruction, the city gets rebuilt stronger. That glimmer of hope matters because it shows Amos isn't just about tearing things down. He's also about pointing toward renewal. Jewish tradition often highlights this ending when reading Amos in synagogue, because no matter how harsh the message, it always circles back to the idea that God's ultimate goal is not destruction, but restoration. The harsh medicine is meant to heal, not kill. That balance between justice and hope is what makes Amos such a rich and enduring voice in the prophetic lineup. So why should we care about Amos today? Because his words hit issues we're still wrestling with. Economic inequality, corruption in leadership, empty displays of religion without ethics, it's all still happening. Amos basically says, don't post Bible verses on Instagram if you're cheating people at work. He reminds us that spirituality is measured in deeds, not decorations. The quote about justice rolling down has been used by civil rights leaders, preachers, and activists because it speaks across time. And think about it. We live in a world where trends change weekly, but a shepherd from 2,700 years ago is still quoted in speeches and protests. That's staying power. Amos challenges us to stop outsourcing righteousness and start practicing it in real life. Whether you're Jewish, Christian, or just someone curious about justice, his message is universal. Don't confuse ritual with righteousness, and don't mistake comfort for blessing. God's presence is tied to justice, not luxury. That's why Amos matters. And that brings us to the end of today's episode on the Book of Amos. To recap, Amos was a shepherd turned prophet who marched into Israel with a message sharper than a chef's knife. Justice matters more than ritual. Privilege means responsibility, and ignoring the poor is a deal breaker with God. He used vivid imagery, fearless courage, and a voice that still echoes today in movements for justice. He may not be the most famous prophet, but he's definitely one of the most relevant. Next time you hear someone quote, "Let justice roll down like waters," you'll know they're channeling Amos. Thanks for hanging out with me today, and I hope you enjoyed this mix of ancient prophecy with modern storytelling. If you liked this episode, please forward it to a friend who might enjoy it, or leave a positive review so others can discover the podcast too. I'm grateful you spent these 10 minutes with me, and I'll see you next time for another journey into everything Jewish, 10 minutes at a time.